Forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads. Prefer a dunk. And expect nothing but the best. This was the Big Ten. Now this is Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
Happy March Madness to all who celebrate. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Deace alongside my co-host who will absolutely never be my partner, Aaron McIntyre. How good to see you, brother. How you enjoying the madness thus far?
You know, not too bad. I had so many projects. I'm sure you know how it is around the house, just different things I need to accomplish. I didn't really catch as much as I wanted to of the tournament, but I did catch the key moments and was able to enjoy parts of the tournament nonetheless. So it's been a little less mad so far this season, and I've seen a lot of people saying, and I thought this as well, boy, the NCAA tournament is dead. I went back and looked from 2014 to 2018, so that's 5 tournaments. There were 43 total victories across all rounds by teams seeded 9th through 16th. From 2019 to 2024, that would be 5 tournaments as well because 2020 was canceled. There were 42 victories by teams seeded 9th through 16th, so across all rounds. So it's not really too much different this year so far. So that's those 2 data sets. I think it's 8.6 wins per year versus 8.4 wins per year. You know, that's around 8.5 wins a year from those 2 sets of data. This year, 7 wins by teams seeded 9th through 16th. So we're really not off the pace that much.
And people are acting like this has never happened before. Well, I mean, we had all the top 4 seeds advance in the first round. It doesn't happen often, but 2017 wasn't that long ago. And by the way, that was the year before the transfer portal. That was the last NCAA tournament before the transfer portal, which, by the way, Aaron, there are almost 700 players inside of that transfer portal.
Including Indiana State's, what did you send me this morning? Including Indiana State's entire roster is just gone.
As of right now,
they don't have a
no
program.
Indiana State has no players on the roster as of right now.
That's dumb. I'm sorry.
That is pretty dumb. You're right. Well, let's get to the Big Five on Bigger Ten, shall we? Let's lead it off with really. You want to talk about history making starts. What the Big Ten did in this NCAA tournament. The Big Ten ended up starting 10-0 in the 2025 NCAA men's tournament. That's the best start by any conference in history. So the Big Ten did end up advancing 4 of its 8 teams to the Sweet 16. SEC with an all-time record of 7. So they had 14 teams in the tournament. So both the SEC and the Big Ten sent half of their league bids on to the second weekend. But your thoughts, Aaron, on the outstanding start that the Big Ten had. There was one common denominator, I thought, watching all the games, the physicality. You just saw Big Ten teams repeatedly just imposing their physical will on their opponents. And then Wisconsin, which is normally one of our most physical teams, but this year that's not kind of who they were. And you saw BYU. It really imposed its will on Wisconsin, get to the rim whenever they wanted. Not coincidentally, Badgers were the first Big Ten team to get eliminated. But the Big Ten off to an all-time great start in this tournament in the first weekend.
Kind of snuck up on me a little bit. I don't think the analog is 1-to-1, but it kind of reminds me, I think it was 2019 or 2021 Pac-12 that just kind of snuck up on everybody and just a level of dominance for them. You know, they weren't a super league yet. They weren't part of, or at least their teams weren't part of the super league that the Big Ten is now. But kind of just snuck up on people and dominated at spots. And yeah, and it was a physical domination, just a physical domination. I think that was actually 2021 that I'm thinking of now. So, yeah, I mean, you looked up and you just saw some of these scores, just scoreboard watching, which is what I was doing a lot of. And I was like, holy cow, they're just wiping the floor, not really having any trouble whatsoever with some of these mid-major programs. So it was very much dominating. That's a good word for it.
Now, one of the teams in our league did have the kind of weekend that is a sign of the times. Okay, so let's talk about the Maryland Terps. So right at the dawn of this tournament, their head coach, Kevin Willard, who's been much speculated for the Villanova job, a coveted job in college basketball, which, by the way, still remains open as we speak, and not a lot of discussion of candidates for said job. So make of that what you will. But Kevin Willard was asked about the speculation that he is a candidate for the Villanova job. And when it came up, he turned it into a long, I wouldn't call it a diatribe. I mean, it was very matter of fact. But, I mean, it was very transparent. He outed his athletic director, Damon Evans. for leaving for SMU before Evans even announced it to the public. Pointed out he's got no one to negotiate with. No one's really in charge of the athletic department. Went back to an event they played in New York City earlier this year where they couldn't stay an extra night over Christmas time because it was going to be too expensive for the school. And yet we're making all this money from the Big Ten Network and television rights fees. So where's it all going? I mean, I'm just telling you right now, there has never been a pre-tournament press conference like what Kevin Willard did. Then Maryland turns around, hits the first buzzer beater in the NCAA tournament, meaning a team that was behind as the clock hit 0 and the ball is in the air and the ball goes in and changes the outcome of the game. The last time we had one of those was what happened to Florida Atlantic by San Diego State in the Final Four in 2023. So their outstanding young player, Patrick Queen, does that for Maryland and sends them off after defeating Colorado State. And then after the game, when Queen is asked about, what the game plan was, he said, well, me and coach just went into the huddle and said, hey, who's got the balls? Take the shot. That was me. So I raised my hand and said, I'll do it. And they asked him, so, why do you guys like Kevin Willard as a coach? His actual response was, he makes sure we get paid. And then the next day, there was to be a pre-Sweet 16 press conference. This also almost never happens. Kevin Willard blew it off, never showed up. So a lot of speculation. Was he in Philadelphia interviewing for the Villanova job? Who knows? I mean, but this entire weekend of Maryland athletics, and the women had a buzzer beater come back too in the NCAA tournament as well. I mean, it just kind of a sign of the times for the Terps this weekend, Aaron.
It's not entirely new, but it's been dialed up to 11, 12, 13, 14 in this era. But the soap operification of sports, it's just, I know you loathe that, but you came from sports radio, so this has always been an element, especially, it shouldn't be. We're in the middle of the frickin' tournaments. We should be talking about the games, but there's always been an element of the soap opera portion of sports and athletics, really across the board, whether it's in college or whether it's in the pros. That's always kind of been around. But this, what you just encapsulated in one weekend, one cycle of developments, just all of the just head-scratching, mind-numbing developments here. And, Kevin, he's got a point. I mean, you're making all this money and you can't stay an extra night in New York City. That's a good point. Putting your athletic director on blast, well, you've got a point. Is that a good look for you? I'm not quite sure. Patrick Queen, hey, points for honesty. That's just, we're all consenting adults here. We're all taxpayers. Let's be transparent with why we're here. And for Patrick Queen, that is apparently the money. That's the first thing that came to his head. Okay? Points for honesty. Don't really like that. That's what, college basketball maybe has becoming or has turned into, and really all of college athletics. But the soap operification of sports, it's just, I guess there is a market for that. I guess people just eat that up and love it.
Somebody's watching Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp. Ain't me, but somebody's doing it.
Correct. Yeah. So I guess that sells in various sectors, but it makes me want to vomit.
Let's get back to the games, shall we? What a miraculous turnaround this has been in year one for Dusty May at Michigan. How miraculous. Look at this stat. Michigan last year finished with 8 wins, its worst season in the history of the program. No other team has lost that many games one season, 24, and then made the Sweet 16 the next since the Sweet 16 officially began in 1975. An incredible turnaround by Dusty May and what he's done this season at the University of Michigan. And I just thought somebody not a Michigan fan on this show should recognize it, Aaron. So I put it in the rundown.
Good job. Good job.
The people.
Good job.
Yes.
Yeah. Good job. Good job.
That's his analysis. Good job. Nice.
Well done.
All right, let's get to the Sweet 16 matchups for the Big Ten here in the second weekend. All right, so Michigan State and Michigan, they could meet in a regional final. I do not think that'll happen. I've got Auburn winning the national championship in my bracket, but they could meet in a regional final. Boy, could you imagine that? Holy crap, man. The amount of hatred and angst in the building if that were to happen.
Isn't Michigan State 2-0 this year?
Yes. Yeah, they've won both matchups, and fairly convincingly, actually. And of course, Michigan State won the regular season title. Michigan won the Big Ten tournament. But they've both got some daunting tasks, particularly Michigan. Michigan's got to beat number 1 overall seed Auburn. It's hard to win a game by double digits in the NCAA tournament when the other team hits 12 out of 27 threes. Auburn just did that. They won by double digits with Creighton shooting the lights out. So, yikes. And everybody made so much of Auburn. Well, they lost the last 3 out of 4. Well, dude, they went 17-1 in the SEC. They freaking clinched it by the 1st of March. Guys had nothing to play for, and they won the conference tournament last year and then got bounced in the first round of the NCAA, so they didn't care about that. You're starting to see the Auburn now that was really number 1 or number 2 in KenPom all year long. That's who Michigan has Friday night. Michigan State kind of plays its own mirror image. I mean, Chris Beard and his style of play is very reminiscent of what Tom Izzo wants to do, and he modeled a lot of that when he was at Texas Tech. Ole Miss kind of takes on that mindset as well. And then you have Purdue. They also face the number 1 seed, but they're in Indianapolis at least, where they'll have some home court advantage, you would think, against a Houston team, though, that's just dramatically better than them, I think. And then you go out west, where aforementioned Maryland takes on another number 1 seed in Florida. So the Big Ten cannot get to the Final Four without defeating at least one number 1 seed in each one of these regions. So it will be tough sledding for the Big Ten. Who do you think's got the best shot to advance, Aaron, and why?
Man, it is tough, really across the board. You know what? I'm just going to say this because this is who my son picked to win it all this year, is Purdue, the Boilermakers. He just picks based on what mascot is funnest to say, and Boilermakers. I mean, I thought Antelopes was fun to say, but Boilermakers is fun to say. No, I have to go with Michigan State. I just think they are probably comprehensively. I mean, they won the Big Ten regular season, so comprehensively, I just have to think.
By 3 games.
Yes, by 3 games. They probably have the best shot. So I like Michigan State the best. I've got a couple of queries coming up later on for you regarding that side of the bracket in Would You Rather.
Finally, some basketball coaching hires of note in our league, man. And I think the second and third tier of our league has severely upgraded in the coaching department as a whole. I think what Darren DeVries did at Drake, and for people that aren't from Iowa like you and I are, you kind of don't really understand where Drake basketball was pretty much your entire life. Well, and going back the entire time that I covered sports for a living in the state of Iowa, they have one NCAA victory until this year. They had one since they went to the Final Four. Since 1971, before I was born, and those Maury John teams that went to a Final Four in '69, again, well before I was born even, and that was a play-in game under Darren DeVries a few years ago. So, I mean, you want to talk about a Bill Snyder level rebuild job on the basketball side. That's pretty much what he did at Drake. And then he went on to West Virginia. They should have been in the NCAA tournament. They weren't even on the bubble of any major bracketologist. That's about the most screwed I can ever remember. And then for the selection committee chairman, and picking up his bonus check for getting his Tar Heels in, to then say, well, their best player, Tucker DeVries, is hurt. He's been hurt all year. Aaron, he hasn't played all frickin' season. Like a week? He played like the first 2 or 3 games, basically.
Weak sauce.
Okay. I mean, it really was. Okay. And so DeVries is off to Indiana. And he is the kind of gym rat coach that will be successful there if they let him. He's not big persona guy, And Indiana fans kind of like the big persona guy. So we'll see how that works. He's bringing his son with him, though, and he can ball. Your Iowa Hawkeyes then took his successor, Ben McCollum, who he kind of has a Bo Ryan pedigree at the Division II level. And then kind of reinvented himself. I guess I wasn't supposed to notice, according to several on our Twitter feed, I wasn't supposed to notice that Drake was 364th in time of possession and pace on KenPom. That supposedly was insulting or something to notice that.
Well, it's not. It's just an aberration from his typical coaching style. But that
it might be.
No, it is. It is based on what he did at Northwest Missouri State. He didn't. I think he averaged fewer than 80 points. I don't think he ever averaged fewer than 80 points a game. But it just goes to show, though, that he's a really good coach. He just took with what he took, and he did an amazing job with what he had. So he had to change his entire style of play to work with what he had at Drake.
He's bringing his star point guard with him as well, or his star player, who is his point guard. He's bringing him with as well to Iowa. And then Minnesota getting one of their alums, Nico Medved, who's done a fantastic job building a program at Colorado State, taking them to a couple of NCAA tournaments. They just, had a first-round win against Memphis. So I think all 3 of those, I mean, the Fran McCaffrey experience is complicated. Iowa was relevant almost every year he was the coach here. They just haven't been out of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament since 1999, right? And so I don't know that we can say right now McCollum is definitively an upgrade. He's different. He's a different person, that's for sure. I think, but I also don't think it's any form of a downgrade either. At the very least, that's just a neutral transaction with a different personality. I think the other two are definitive upgrades. So by and large, I mean, it's not getting any easier in this league.
Yeah, and going back to Drake, the last three coaches of Drake in the same coaching cycle are all being hired by these three teams. Because Nico Medved,
right.
He did a great.
Was there before DeVries.
Yeah,
right.
He did a great job with Drake as well. Not to the levels that DeVries got him to, or McCollum this year, but he did a good job too. So I think the way you put it there, not sure how much of an upgrade McCollum is at Iowa, but I don't think it's a downgrade. And I think the analog, Scott Docterman, I think after you even made this analogy, he drew the analogy to Bo Ryan as well. Nico Medved at Minnesota. I think, and here's the position that you're in as the Big Ten, or in the Big Ten, I should say. No, from top to bottom, because of the resources and the contracts, the TV contract money that you have coming in here, there is no excuse why you should not be within spitting distance of some of the best options from the mid-major teams that are up-and-coming coaches. There's no reason that you should not be competitive. There's no reason why you would think, hey, if NIL were not a thing, which it is a thing, and it's a big thing, and it's a big separating factor. If NIL were not a thing, if you're Iowa, you're thinking I should be able to go out and at least talk to Darian DeVries or Ben McCollum or Nico, what have you. So I think all three of these schools, probably for them and where they are as programs, got the best possible option available on the table for them in this coaching change cycle. So we'll see how it goes.
I agree with that as well. I agree with that as well.
We'll see how it goes. Again, I think Indiana just seems to be cursed right now, and I don't know what we tried to game theory this out a few episodes ago, or maybe it was just last episode. But I don't know what's in the water there. That's the one that I worry about the most, because it seems like on paper, and there was rumors that Mark Cuban money came in for their NIL commitments as well, and that's not necessarily a new thing. That's the one that I worry about the most, because we started this, Bigger 10 podcast back in 2018, 2017, something like that. And there was a coaching cycle there. I think Ohio State, Indiana was another one of them. And I think Indiana has been through 3 or 4 different head coaches in the time that we've been doing this show. Mm-hmm. So there's something weird there. That's the one that I worry about the most.
I think you're just dealing with a fan base that has a great tradition and rightfully has high expectations, but is not giving. I mean, Tom Crean had chances, and he won a couple of Big Ten championships, and then the program got down again, and they didn't give him a chance to get it back up. I think some of the other coaches just frankly weren't given an opportunity to see what they could truly do. In Kelvin Sampson's case, they ran him out of there. He was winning 80% of his games. They ran him out of there because he was doing the stuff in recruiting that is now legal and everyone is doing, right? So they kind of just hired him maybe 5 to 10 years too early. But it's a toxic fan base right now, and I know a little bit about this. I mean, as a Michigan fan, and you lose 20 years in a row to Ohio State, and you still have all this great tradition and all these resources, right? And so you rightfully have high expectations. And so what's the line? I mean, listen, I was one of the people that wanted Jimmy gone after 2020. And out of nowhere, he then turns around and has arguably the best 3-year run at Michigan since fielding Yost. Now, and that's incredible. I mean, given what Michigan has done in the past. So DeVries knows how to build a program. And if they let him do it, because he does not have the personality that's going to capture the imagination of Hoosier fans in the interim. So you're going to have to get out of the way a little bit and let him cook. And it's not helping him, frankly, that you've got the IU alum over there from Bloomington at Michigan, and Dusty May, who we just talked about, went from 8 wins to the Sweet 16 for the first time in college basketball history. That's not helping you either, but if they give him time, he will be successful. I think the best thing McCollum, I think, has going for him is he's an Iowa fan, understands the program, the ecosystem, the fan base, and where they're at. And I think that will buy him some time. They will feel an emotional attachment to him right away. And then Medved, I think, has that going for him too, as a Gopher alum. All right, we'll come back and we'll take a quick break. Come back. We'll play Would You Rather when we do. Stay tuned. All right, Aaron, time to play some Would You Rather. Brother, you ready to go?
Let's go.
Let's kick it into high gear. Would you rather bet Purdue or Michigan money line in the Sweet 16? They're both about the same underdog to a number 1 seed, although Purdue has more of the home court advantage here playing Houston and Indianapolis.
I think Purdue, because of that last factor there, because you're right, they're pretty even in terms of their underdog nature. But I think just because if there's one thing that can maybe an X factor, it is that basically that de facto home field advantage or home court advantage that they're enjoying. So I'm betting Purdue, but it's pretty close. Next is for you. Would you rather play Michigan State or Ole Miss in the Elite Eight if you're a Michigan fan?
I'm going to give you the answer I'm not supposed to give you, but I'd rather play Ole Miss. I don't think listen, if you're still playing, you're a good basketball team. But I think that they are kind of a facsimile version of Michigan State, meaning it's a very similar style, but without the level of depth that Michigan State, who at times can just roll hockey lines of players. I mean, Michigan State's got 3-4 guys who they could go out there against our 2 7-footers and just, get 5 fouls and really gum up the offense because they don't ever have to play passive at the rim out of fear of foul trouble. And they did that to us very successfully. And so they can just consistently be aggressive on the boards as well, not worried about any cheap fouls there because they can just roll in another guy who has the same body type and largely the same skill set. I would much rather play Ole Miss. They're a very good team. Wouldn't shock me if they beat Michigan State. Chris Beard's a very good coach. But again, they're kind of the Walmart version of what Michigan State is. So I'd rather face that than the main enterprise. For you, would you rather be Ben McCollum or Nico Medved?
I think for now, I'd rather be Nico Medved. Minnesota, for whatever reason, is just a difficult place to have sustained success. It seems like they kind of started having some success with Richard Pitino, but it really never got to the levels that they wanted. So I think the expectations there in Minneapolis are tempered a little bit. I mean, it is we've talked about this before. It's a pro sports town, but still, you should be able to have pretty good fan support in one of the top 20 metros in the United States. It's a basketball arena. There should be pretty good fan support. So I think the expectations are probably lower for Medved than they are for McCollum at Iowa. So I'd rather be Nico Medved for now. Finally, if you're Michigan State, would you rather face Michigan, where it's really hard to beat the same team 3 games in one season, or Auburn, who you picked to win it all?
I would absolutely rather play Michigan. And if I'm a Michigan State fan, I remember John Beilein's last year at Michigan. He had a great team. They won 33 games, and they lost to Michigan State 3 times. They lost the regular season at Michigan State the last weekend of the regular season. They lost the Big Ten Tournament Championship to Michigan State as well. And so you have a precedent for doing that and against the best basketball coach Michigan's ever had and may ever have, frankly. So I'd much rather play Michigan. I know them. I know their strengths, their weaknesses. The problem we have with Auburn, they're not really a team with a definable weakness. I think there are 2 teams that don't have definable weaknesses. And when I say that, I'm not saying they're like all-time great college basketball teams. I'm just saying they don't have an immediate area that you feel like you can attack. They're pretty good at everything. And I think that's Duke and Auburn. And they've been 1 or 2 in Ken Palm all year long because of that. And so you kind of have to hope that you kind of catch them in an off shooting night. And that means even when you beat them, if they're engaged, I think it's pretty clear they were not engaged at Auburn at the end of the year after they won the SEC regular season. They kind of put it on cruise control from there. And so if they're engaged, then you kind of have to hope they just have a bad shooting night, which happens in basketball. It's a wide variance sport, but that also means you're not in control of your own destiny at all. And I think that's the situation that Michigan is facing on Friday night. And I think Michigan State would face it too. That's why I'd rather face Michigan. I know I could beat them if you're Sparty.
All right, that's it.
All right, we'll come back and we'll look at our X-Poll results and our feedback of the week here next. Stay tuned. All right, Aaron, X-Poll results. How many of the Big Ten's 4 teams in the Sweet 16 advanced to the Final Four? 9% of you, apparently that's how many people are listening and watching at the Big Ten offices, voted for 3. 25% said 2, 44% said just 1, 22% said 0. Looks like you were the one, just one vote there, Aaron. I'm guessing you're thinking Sparty?
Yeah, I think Sparty probably, I mean, the odds of 2 teams getting in, I just think are so I mean, you look at the totality of this tournament every single year, the odds of 2 teams getting in, especially in a competitive field like we're talking about here, it's too high for me. So I think 1 is probably the most likely thing. Now, maybe I should have taken another look at 0, but I think 1, I think Michigan State probably is the most likely one.
By the way, if you went to public school and you're wondering why, well, Steve, there's 4 Big Ten teams in the Sweet 16. Why wasn't 4 an option? Well, 2 of them are in the same region, as we just pointed out. Yeah. So that 3 is the most we could get. So there's that. All right, that brings us to our feedback of the week. And this comes from Chidviknik, I believe, CHDVNK. He said, hey, you guys said on your show that the Big Ten's advantage wouldn't be with weather or local talent, but it would have the money to pay top coaches, and we're seeing that now in basketball. Should be fun. We are seeing that in basketball now. I mean, the roster, and the SEC did this first. The SEC made it key a couple of years ago. Greg Sankey put out an edict across the league. He was tired of being an also-ran in basketball, and he wanted the league to be taken every bit as serious in basketball, except for, other than Kentucky, obviously. But the league to be taken as seriously in basketball as it is in football. And the caliber of coaches, bringing in Nate Oates, with the great run he had and everything else, and the coaches they hired, you've seen that roster of coaches, and that ends up being 14 teams, makes the NCAA tournament this year. And I think the Big Ten is now starting to make that kind of level of investment as well in its basketball coaches, Aaron.
Yeah, this is what we were talking about just a few moments ago, is you should not, there's no excuse to not at least be within spitting distance of whoever is the best talent available for each coaching cycle. If you are in the Big Ten, there's no excuse for you to settle for anybody. So I think that's exactly what we're seeing. The big separating factor now is, and it's going to be for the foreseeable future, is NIL. But just baseline coaching, you should not have to settle for anybody if you're a member of the Big Ten.
Well, that'll do it for this week's episode. Whether or not we have one next week will be determined by whether or not we get a team into the Final Four. If we do, we'll have one next week. If we don't, we'll wait for a couple weeks until we hear some more spring football news and do it then. In the meantime, please follow us on X at Bigger10. We love it when you do that, so please keep doing so. You can also like, rate, share, subscribe, 5-star review, comment right here, whether you're watching on video on YouTube, listening on iTunes, or elsewhere. All those things you do really help to boost the show, benefit the show. We appreciate each and every one of those. Thank you. Also appreciate my co-host, never partner, Aaron McIntyre. For him, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you next time right here on Bigger 10.